Welcome back into the Hook 'em Hoops podcast brought to you by the Field of 68. Tommy Yarrish alongside Jason Kinander. Jason, Baylor beats Texas and Waco 93-85. Just a catastrophic collapse for the Longhorns in the second half. They led by, I believe, as many as 11 with 13 minutes left to go in the game. Max Asmus could probably have gotten 30 points on Gary Payton that night. And instead, the Longhorns end up blowing that lead, and Baylor comes all the way back to win it. Jason, it felt like for me, and this is not like a LeBron James type lying moment here, but it felt like for me, as soon as Dylan Dessou went down, this game was over for Texas.
Hmm.
Baylor was already going on a run, and Dessou was limited. He only played 10 minutes, but you could tell that just the energy was completely sucked out of that team because you're obviously very concerned about what happens to Dylan Dessou and what his status is going forward. I believe Rodney Terry said in the post-game press conference that he thought Dylan Dessou was going to be okay, which is a very good sign. He came back to the huddle later in the game after he went back to the locker room. Nothing on his leg or knee or any braces or crutches like that. So all good signs, but man, the Longhorns had a chance to really pick up a quality win here and position themselves better in the NCAA tournament on the road at Baylor. If they were to go 2-0 against Baylor, I mean, man, that could have made them a 7 seed lock, I think, Jason. But instead, they go into Oklahoma looking for their 20th win.
And it's difficult, right, Tommy, because that 7 seed would be such a good area for them to be at. Really, if they get slotted against a lower 2 seed or even a high 3 seed as a 6 seed in the second round, they would have a fighting chance to make the second weekend. But I agree with you that Dylan Dessou going down was really the worst omen in this game. That ended the game. Dessou was never 100%. We were told, I was covering the game up in Waco for Texas Student Television, and we were told by SID Scott McConnell, like not even 20 minutes before tip off, that Dessou was questionable for the game with a stomach bug. And I had actually noticed during shoot around, I mean, he was the last one out there. He looked exhausted. He wasn't going to play a whole lot to begin with that night, just because of his health. Caden Shedrick gave Texas really good minutes. We'll talk more about Shedrick in a minute. But I think, you said the game ended when Dessou went down. I would contend that the game didn't even matter once Dessou went down. Non-contact leg injury for your fifth-year big man who has really been their most consistent player this season. I mean, we were all thinking the worst, especially those at home, those in the arena. It didn't look good, and for it to right now, it's a left knee sprain. Hopefully won't keep Dessou out for that long. That's excellent, excellent news for Texas because, win or lose that game against Baylor, the games that are happening next week and the week after mean a lot more. And so Texas needs Dessou to be fully healthy. And that would have sucked for the second year in a row for him to go down when he's playing good basketball right at the end of the season. That would have really sucked for him. Horrible game for Texas. When your entire team's in foul trouble, that's what's going to happen. This isn't a deep team, especially at the forward positions. And yeah, we learned that the hard way if we didn't already know it on Monday night. Brock Cunningham fouled out with 10 minutes left in the game. Those 2 minutes, the last 2 minutes of game time for him, was firmly like the worst 2 minutes of game time I've ever seen him play in a Texas uniform. That's really saying something. I mean, he missed two wide open shots, had the rough foul to foul out, and then after he fouls out, the foul gets reviewed and gets turned into a flagrant one. We'll talk more about the game in a second, but I just want to say there was a lot of backlash on Twitter that our friend of the podcast, Fran Fraschilla, incorrectly stated on the broadcast that that was definitely a reputation foul, as it should have been. I completely agree. I think that when you've played 5 years in a row in the Big 12 and you're a hard-nosed, physical type of player, especially on the road, loving to rile up the road fans and make those energy plays for Texas, yeah, that was a reputation foul. And it's okay to support Texas, to watch Texas, to follow Texas, and to admit that that was a reputation foul and that, yeah, it was probably the right call. That's what happens when you do what he did on national television last week in Lubbock in a big environment. That's just what happens. And we've seen it with Grayson Allen, we've seen it with other bigger name players in the past, and it hurts a lot more when the player who commits that foul isn't giving you 30 a night like Grayson Allen was at Duke. It's really harmful to the team. And I mean, other than that, Caden Shedrick, 27 minutes off the bench, 14 points. That's good. They'll take more of that. Dessou, quiet game. Dylan Mitchell, I think we need to talk about. He hasn't been a factor in weeks, and Rodney Terry pulled a quick trigger on or pulled the quick plug on him after a couple of bad plays early in the second half. That should have been a good matchup for Dylan Mitchell. Jalen Bridges is not a good defender. Jalen Bridges shot the hell out of the basketball on Monday night, but he's not a good defender. And Dylan Mitchell shot the ball 3 times. Like, the game plan needs to be better than that. Did you what else did you think Texas didn't do right? Because I thought other than that, the offense moved well, especially in the first half. I mean, they've had this Baylor team figured out for 3 of the 4 halves that they've played them in this year. And they're 1-1 against with a negative point differential. I think that's crazy.
Well, I think everything offensively for them was perfect. Like this was one of the better offensive games we've seen. Texas has been in a fantastic offensive rhythm the last few games. Like the Longhorns have been lighting it up from the field. Max Asmus finally got hot. He had that 3-game stretch where it was the worst 3-game stretch of his entire career. And then he still got his scoring numbers up, but still wasn't shooting the ball at a very high clip. This time he finally comes out and has that game where you're like, okay, nobody can guard Max Asmus right now. And that's great. But with Dylan DeSue only scoring 3 points, that certainly doesn't help. And then you look at the rest of the starting line. I mean, Tyrese Hunter had 2 threes early on in the game and then went quiet immediately after that. Caden Shedrick was really big off the bench. Like you said, he's very efficient, 14 quick points in 27 minutes. But you're going to need more than that if you're going to beat a team like Baylor, especially when Jalen Bridges also couldn't be guarded by anybody in the world. He shot 10 of 13 from the free throw line, 8 of 11 from the field, and 6 of 7 from three. I mean, we knew the Longhorns had terrible perimeter defense, but what is that? You're leaving a guy wide open 7 times from three and he hits 6 of them. That's going to beat you every time. And I'll leave with this one more thing on Brock Cunningham. Brock Cunningham played 18 minutes. He scored 3 points, had 5 fouls. Friend of the show, Chris Johnson, played 1 minute and had 2 points. So Chris Johnson, in 17 less minutes, almost made the same scoring impact that Brock Cunningham did in 18. I don't see why he's playing, Jason. I don't get it. I don't get it. There's nothing good coming from him being on the floor. And the only reason he had that 3rd point was because he made 1 of 2 free throws, by the way. He was 1 of 4 from the field. What are we doing here? I think we need to stop convincing ourselves that Brock Cunningham is a valuable asset to this Texas team just because he's the quote unquote glue guy and he's been at Texas for 800 years now. He's not a good basketball player, man. I'm sorry, but he's not. He's not providing anything to this team. And you can tell me, oh, well, he plays good defense. He's not playing good defense if Jalen Bridges is coming out and scoring 32 points and Texas is blowing a double-digit lead in the second half. No one's playing good defense if that's happening. So you can't tell me that Brock Cunningham is going to come into the game and change that for Texas defensively. You have so much more talent on the roster, and you're just not using it when you put Brock Cunningham on the floor, in my opinion. So that's my last thought on the Baylor game. Looking ahead to Oklahoma, I think the biggest question, of course, will be whether or not Dylan DeSue is able to play. If he is, fantastic. Now the question is, how good is he going to be able to play? And number two, how long of a leash does he have if he still has some injury trouble bugging him in his knee? If he's not able to play, Jason, I think this turns into the Caden Shedrick game again. He's going to have to step up big. I could probably see him sliding into the starting lineup, and I know you would love to see that as well.
He deserves it. He deserves it. I mean, it's time for Caden Shedrick to continue to get those minutes. 27 minutes off the bench was great. A lot of it was out of necessity because DeSue being hurt, but he deserves it. And Caden Shedrick really playing his best basketball. Had a great time, and he looks so healthy too, which is great. Like, they really need that. They're getting the guy who they thought that they were getting out of the portal from Virginia, which is great. I'm intrigued to watch this OU game. I really hope that DeSue can go because that was really – when he started to click this year, he started to click on the road against OU, and he hit a bunch of deep threes. He hit a bunch of contested jump shots, really what he does the best. And we were like, oh, God, this is the Dylan DeSue that we got in March. And, he's really kind of played a lot like that ever since. And so that would be a nice finish to his career at the Moody Center, having a nice game on Saturday against OU. Very excited to watch that. I think Texas should win this game, especially if DeSue plays. I think that the thing that I'm the most looking forward to seeing if they'll improve upon in this game is like, are they going to learn how to play defense without fouling? It's something that they have struggled with throughout the year. I don't think it's just going to change overnight, but they know as well as we do that once you get into March and you get into these winter go home games, like if your best players can't play, no one wants to go out that way. And so Texas is going to have to keep playing physical. They're going to have to keep playing defense without fouling, and they're going to have to out rebound their opponents. Every time they out rebound their opponent, even if it's by 1 or 2, they win. And they got out rebounded by 10 against a Baylor team that is unfortunately smaller than they are. And so that can't really happen. And so Texas is going to need to out rebound Oklahoma. Like, this is an easy formula to win. Another good sign that we've gotten in really the last 3 games, but it was reaffirmed against Baylor. Max Asmus is fully back. 32 points, tied his career high in a Texas uniform, really played his ass off, found his shots in the first half. Those were high efficiency looks for him. He made them open shots, catch and shoot threes in the quarter, the stuff that he is in a Texas uniform for. And he did it well for the most part on Monday night in Waco. We'll need to see a lot more of that on Saturday. And yeah, Saturday is senior night. So a lot of decisions that'll be coming up for Texas after this season is over. Really, the only guys who are out of eligibility, Brock Cunningham finally is out of eligibility. Ithiel Horton, after 6 years of college, is out of eligibility. Dylan Dessou is out of eligibility after 5 years of college. Let's
Asmus
think.
is done.
Max Asmith, yeah, Asmith is done, and so that leaves Tyrese Hunter, Dylan Mitchell, Caden Shedrick. I'm interested to see what Zarek Onyema does because he didn't really play this year. Maybe he goes back to the mid-major ranks. Kendall Weaver, I think, is the only one that we can really sit here at the start of March and be like, all right, like he's going to be back in a Texas uniform next year, which stinks because we say this every year. Like, there are like 1 or 2 guys who we know are going to be back, and the staff doesn't want to continually rebuild the roster, and poof, they're going to have to do it again. Who do you think is going to be coming back next year? I know that everyone who we're looking at, other than Caden Shedrick, because he has his COVID year, other than Caden Shedrick, has 1 year, 2 years of eligibility remaining because they're underclassmen. But who do you think is going to be back other than Kendall Weaver?
As you guys know by now, we've partnered with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 as we all get ready for the best month of the year, March Madness. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use the bonus code FIELD150 and you will get $150 in free bets on your first wager with BetMGM, regardless of whether or not you win that first bet. Here's the best part. All you need to do is deposit and bet $5 of your hard-earned money. This is how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FIELD150. That's FIELD150. Deposit at least $5 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $150 in bonus bets regardless of the outcome of your bet. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD150 when you sign up. And remember, BetMGM is now available in one wallet in select states. As a New Jersey resident, this is super convenient when I have to go cover games in Philly or New York, which happens quite a bit. When you cross state borders, you just log into your existing account and fire away. You don't have to create a new account in each state. It's easy, it's simple, and it's clean. And most importantly, we have some fun stuff coming up for the conference tournaments and for the NCAA tournament. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odds boost, and my personal favorite, a nice little parlay boost here and there. So download the BetMGM app and sign up today. Big news, guys. I am thrilled to announce that we have partnered with Autograph, a company founded by the GOAT himself, Tom Brady. The Autograph fandom app gives you access to the best college hoops content, fan contests, and exclusive rewards like discounted tickets, all for doing the things that diehard fans like you already do, following your favorite team in the news and listening to podcasts just like this one. When Tom, and yes, I am calling him Tom, we're on a first name basis these days, co-founded Autograph, He had one mission in mind: change the fan experience for the better. It works like this: you get all of your college hoops content you want in one place. You get articles from your favorite writers, pods from your favorite hosts, contests from your favorite creators, all on the feeds and the sites that you already enjoy. But instead of having to go to all these different places, it all comes to you in one spot: the Autograph Fandom app. But here's the best part: the more content that you consume, the higher you rank in the app. As you consider the level up in status on the app, you can unlock unique rewards curated exclusively for you. So download the free Autograph app in the App Store and use the referral code F68, that's F68, or tap in at the link in the description below or in the podcast app of your choosing to start earning points for doing something as normal as listening to this very podcast.
Well, Jason, I'll answer it this way. When it comes to what makes sense for these players to come back, really, I think you could argue all of them. It would make sense for them to come back. Dylan Mitchell, just he hasn't lived up to what initially was his lottery hype when he came out of high school. And I don't know if that's a development issue, if that's a Dylan Mitchell's just being used in the wrong way issue, but I haven't seen anything from this year to last, and he's gotten much better. I'll tell you that. And I'm not saying that Dylan Mitchell's gotten worse or anything like that, or he's fallen off a cliff. He's gotten better, but has he gotten better to the point where he's a guy who gets drafted in the NBA draft? I don't know about that. Even in a weak draft class like this year, I think this is an incredibly weak draft class. I don't see Dylan Mitchell going in the top 60 picks. So it's a question of, does Dylan Mitchell either just blow somebody away at the combine, which he kind of did last year? Remember that video went around where he was knocking down threes left and right, and we're all wondering where the hell that was when he was in Austin. So if that happens, if he goes to the combine, has a great combine, and somebody tells him like, "Hey, we'll take you in the second round if you're there and you declare," then I can definitely see that happening. So that's the one that I'm on the fence about, but it would make sense for him to come back for one more year. And if he's a 4-year guy, I don't think there's any shame in that for him, because eventually, what you mentioned, Jason, we're building the roster. Like there's going to be a day where he's the guy for Texas, and he's going to be the number one option, I think. And yes, that might be a little bit jarring to think about considering everything that we've seen from him so far, but we've also seen those flashes where he can, be a leading scorer. He can kind of do everything and be everywhere and be a consistent double-double machine. Let's see, who is next? Tyrese Hunter. He's just been way too inconsistent. It doesn't make any sense I don't think he's put a solid resume together enough to where he could get drafted. And I'm not sure he's that intriguing as an undrafted free agent prospect either, just because of that inconsistency. So unless he has a fantastic closing stretch to the season, I think it would make sense for him to come back, just because, again, with Max Asmus leaving, that's a role that he can step into alongside Kendall Weaver, who, like you mentioned, I think comes back as well. Caden Shedrick, another guy who would make sense to come back, because there's your replacement for Dylan Nassau right off the bat. He would become the big man at Texas, and I think he's shown at some points this season that he can play in that role. The question is, can he do it every given night like Dessou has done over the past 2 years for Texas? And that's obviously a huge question to answer. Zarek Onyema, I would love to see him stick around. I love his physicality. Sure, he didn't play a lot of minutes this year, but what's the one thing that the Longhorns have lacked in games they've lost? Rebounding ability. And I think Zarek Onyema, although a little bit undersized, can give you that, especially transitioning into the SEC. So maybe I'm too optimistic, Jason, but I'm also looking at it from a perspective of like what makes sense for these players when it comes to their draft stock and their NBA stock in general.
Yeah, I think that the most likely of everyone to come back is Caden Shedrick. I think that he came here to be maybe not the guy, but one of the guys. If he was healthy all year this year, he probably would have been the top scoring option off the bench. Would have really changed the way that this team looked for the majority of conference play. I have a good feeling he'll be back next year, especially if he finishes strong. We saw what he did in the tournament last year. He's played his best basketball this season down the stretch. I tend to think Caden Shedrick will be back. Dylan Mitchell, it's weird to look at and say he's gotten better this year, but he probably made the wrong choice by coming back. right? Like if he stayed in the NBA draft last year, he would have gotten drafted for sure. He certainly would have been a second round pick, but he would have gotten drafted. He was firmly a top 60 player in that draft and was getting some late first round, murmurs. Obviously, if that was going to happen, he would have stayed in the draft. But Dylan Mitchell's the decision that interests me the most because I do agree. He could be the guy in a year or two. He is hyper talented, former number 2 recruit in the country. I would hope for you that he would come back, but that one I tend to be a little more 50-50 on because, Dylan Mitchell, you could also argue in a different system with a different coaching staff who really unlocks his game, he could average like 15 and 10. And I just don't ever see that happening here at Texas. Tyrese Hunter, it's weird speculating on guys who could hit the portal. I think he likes it here. I could see him running it back for a third year, but you know, compared to what he did his freshman year at Iowa State and who he was, he's a great defender now. He's not the shooter he was there, but that's a guy where if he steps down a level, goes to a mid-major or a lower high major, he'll be their top scoring option or number 2 scoring option. He's a talented enough player to where he can fill it up. And then that could be his more likely path to the NBA than a respectable career at Texas. And so, he'll have the most to think about really out of all of those guys because Dylan Mitchell can still unlock this next part of his game in the time that he has left at Texas. Tyrese Hunter, I think if he wants to make it to the NBA, will kind of need to revert back to his old ways and keep the defense that he's developed. And so it'll be interesting. Senior night's always fun. I'll be there. I'm going to have some family in town watching the game with me. And so it'll be cool being a student at the Moody Center. I actually have only been a student at the Moody Center twice ever for anything. And once was a non-conference basketball game my junior year. And they played I think it was Houston Christian actually. And they won by 50. Texas did. And then the other time was for a Harry Styles concert. And that wasn't very fun at all. And so, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be nice seeing Max Asmus and Dylan Dessou and, Brock Cunningham too. Anytime you spend 6 years at the school and become synonymous with the program, you deserve your flowers and your round of applause. And so it'll be cool seeing those guys get their moment. Other than that, I think that Texas should have this one in the bag. They're looking at 7 to 9 seed right now. I think they're pretty safe off the bubble after beating OK State and beating Texas Tech. So we have the Big 12 tournament next week. What do we think Texas's outlook is looking like? We will do a full preview next week when the bracket comes out. I'll be in Kansas City for Texas Student Television. But, we have one more regular season game before an absolute gauntlet of the Big 12 tournament. How do you think Texas is going to fare?
If they get one win, I think that's more than enough, Jason. We need to set the bar low here. We should not be coming in here saying, "Oh man, Texas, I could definitely see them winning 2 games." No, probably not. More than likely, because I think the best draw for them would be if they can get out of the first round matchup and play Iowa State on a neutral court. I think that would be fantastic. I'm not sure how the current alignment is. But if somehow that draw is possible, that would probably be the best. Just because I think Iowa State is a completely different team when they are at home versus when they're on the road versus when they're at a neutral site. And that's not to discredit TJ Otzelberger. He and his staff have done a great job. I think they played some of their best basketball at Houston when they came up just a little bit short, to kind of silence that narrative a little bit. But at the same time, it's much better than winning and then playing Houston because we know what's going to happen there. So for the Longhorns, I would say, yeah, a win in the first round would be a win for the Big 12 tournament in and of itself. I think that more than enough. Rodney Terry would absolutely take that if you put it on the table for him. In the second round, if you get an Iowa State and you win that, then that's an even bigger, greater win. But I'm setting the bar at 1 win right now. I think if they get one, that's enough for me to be like, okay, yeah, maybe if they get a good draw in the tournament, they can go to the second round. But the expectations are on the floor for me, Jason.
especially in this year's Big 12, right? Like,
Exactly.
I think that we're not like talking about enough how there's like a pretty, maybe not that realistic chance, but like if Tennessee loses on Saturday and then they get bumped early in the SEC tournament, Iowa State might be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament this year. They're ranked 6th right now. They have 6 losses. They have an unbelievable resume. They're a fantastic team, but I'd love to see them in the second round of the Big 12 tournament if I'm Texas. I mean, that's a team that Texas matches up well against, even Kansas. Like, Kansas just beat the brakes off of K-State earlier this week, but they're way different on a neutral floor or road environment than they are at home, especially at Allen Fieldhouse. And so I wouldn't feel good about Texas in that matchup, but I'd feel better than I would against about half these teams. Really, the last thing that I have here is that yeah, I mean Texas is basically locked into the NCAA tournament field, which is nice and definitely good for the Longhorns that they're not entering this Big 12 tournament needing a game. Probably the worst conference where you would need to win a game in the tournament because, I mean, any first round matchup for Texas is going to be tough. They might face OU in back to back games, which would be
That's what
pretty
I was
crazy.
about to say. I'm looking at the tournament picture right now. So right now it would be Texas and Oklahoma, and the winner gets Houston. So if you beat Oklahoma back-to-back games, basically, and if they get out of that game, Jason, I think that's a win. And if they can hang
That's
with
one of the,
Houston, I think that's a mini win.
it's like 2 quad 2 wins if they beat OU back to back games.
Exactly.
And they'd be 3-0 against them this year. Like that, I mean, it's not a basketball rivalry. Like people don't really understand this outside of the state of Texas. Like it's just not really a rivalry in basketball. Texas and
It's
OU. It's
not.
just
It's not.
those.
Like football takes up so much of the energy that there's none of it left for basketball.
It's a bigger rivalry in baseball and in softball and honestly in volleyball than it is in basketball. Like those,
Yep.
I think those teams like each other. To be honest with you, like especially compared to like Texas Tech and even like Baylor too. Like the game got a little chippy on Monday night in the first half, and it's like I just always laugh a little bit when that happens at Baylor because like there's a pretty fine line between like what those student athletes can and will say, and it's like that it can't get chippy. Like how does
No.
it get chippy at
At
Foster
Baylor. That's not
Pavilion?
gonna that can't happen.
Yeah.
I
So
do
like,
want to go ahead, sorry.
no, you continue. You continue.
I do want to make one point about Oklahoma because I was thinking about this before we started. Um, dude, they have been on such an emotional roller coaster over the last few weeks. They
Mm.
lose to Baylor and Kansas in back-to-back games. They get a buzzer beater win over Oklahoma State after that. Then they drop two more back-to-back, including a 2-point loss to Houston at home. And they barely escaped last night against Cincinnati. So boy, this is a team that has been just all over the place. Javian McCollum did not play last night either. I think he was a late scratch. People were not
Mm.
expecting that. So if that's, I'm not sure what his status is, but if that's the case again for Saturday, um, then I really like Texas's chances. I already do, but I just wanted to point that out. Yeah, that is a tough stretch to have. It's been all the way up and down for Porter Moser's crew, who I think got their first 20-win season since 2016, by the way. So the Porter Moser agenda is looking real good right now, but um, it's
Yeah.
probably not going to look real good on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I wanted to say you rattled off that OU resume, the overtime game against Cincinnati and a close home loss to Houston and a buzzer beater against a crappy team. That reminds me a lot of Texas's resume. Like we're seeing two of the same team on Saturday.
It's like looking in a
Which would be
mirror.
yeah. Javion McCollum, shoulder injury in practice. X-rays came back clean Wednesday morning, and so he might be good to go on Saturday. Sounds like he'll be fine for the Big 12 tournament. So, I mean, that's the number 2 scorer on both teams is questionable at best to play on Saturday. It should be an interesting game, maybe a game for Tyrese Hunter to catch fire or Dylan Mitchell. Dylan Mitchell is who I've got my eyes on for, all right, let's get him going today. Especially because, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't he play pretty well against OU? The first time Texas played him, that was a pretty good Dylan Mitchell game.
He had 8 points, 13 boards, 2 assists, 2 blocks.
Yeah, 13 boards. 13 boards. I think that's a career high for him. We'll take that on Saturday night for sure, because he hasn't made that kind of impact in the game in quite a little while. So especially, you need him to be playing his best basketball down the stretch. Aspis is clicking. Dessou, you want to get healthy. Tyrese Hunter, but who need to get Dylan Mitchell going, or else the Longhorns are going to be in trouble in the next couple of weeks. Tommy, good as always to talk to you. We'll have a lot to talk about next week, the Big 12 tournament. I'll be in Kansas City, super excited for that. You'll be on spring break, super excited for you. But we will still talk, and that'll be nice. And then after that, it's what we've all been waiting for, the NCAA tournament, and most exciting time of the year. And no better place to be tuned into it than the Field of 68 and us here on the Hook 'em Hoops pod. Y'all have a good one. Talk to you soon.